I'd like to welcome you to our International Expeditions online seminar today. We are here to talk about photography in Chile. And I'd like to start by turning it over to Emily Harley. Emily, over to you.
Well, thank you, Lee, and thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about Chile, which is absolutely one of the most gorgeous and diverse countries you can honestly ever hope to visit. We're really honored to be joined today by Claudio Vidal, who I will introduce you to in just a moment. If we can keep, there we go. But before we introduce you to Claudio, I did want to tell you a little bit about International Expeditions, just in case you're new to the company. International Expeditions is coming up on 4 decades of perfecting nature travel, trying to create experiences that inspire you to protect and preserve Earth's most precious places, but they also provide a really authentic, immersive look at the wildlife, the culture, the food, the folk tales, and the cuisine that are in these incredible environments. Now, of course, people like Claudio are the biggest reason that you get such an immersive and insightful experience. So having said that and told you just a little bit about International Expeditions, I want to go ahead and introduce you to your host today, Claudio Vidal. Claudio's worked with IE for decades, and he's actually joining us from Chile, where he is an incredible naturalist, ornithologist, photographer, and author. So, Claudio, I will let you take away, introduce yourself, and get us going as we learn more about photographing Chile.
Well, thanks very much, Emily Lee, for organizing this webinar in such a beautifully fluid way and making things easier for us. Thanks also for IE for allowing me to collaborate with them for so many years in showing to them the country I call home, Chile. A geographical extravaganza, some authors of the past have called the country. But I will give you some additional background on the country, on the destination later on. I would like to start this presentation with this view that I personally have as a naturalist, as an ornithologist, but in an activity that has accompanied me in the course of my field experiences is photography. Analog photography in the past, digital photography in recent years. So there's been a transition. It's been a process of adaptation too, as the technology progresses and changes. But for me, it's just fascinating to learn about the subject, to have the nature photographer as a subject. It's just beautiful to see them working in the field in different categories with different levels of commitment and compromise, and I hope that you can see part of this later on with various examples that I'm going to show you. I will probably emphasize during this presentation on a number of guidelines, pieces of advice, some comments that I would like to maybe to suggest to people. In my experience as a field photographer, I like to avoid bright colors in terms to be part of the natural scene, not to be disturbing the behavior of the animals. I think that is some practical advice. Also, in recent years, we have more and more trouble in getting in the plane. Carry-on items, all your carry-on and check baggage is constantly weighed in the process of traveling, reaching the destination. So I think that there is a practical constraint in the preparation of the trip. So pack wisely and have all your accessories, your cameras and bodies in a way that is also easy to transport, not just in the aircraft, but also in the field. I like to feel people portable with their gear once they are in the field, when they are putting the backpack, the rucksack, and start a hike in the middle of the, just before sunrise. This is not funny to carry too much. I think that that's part of the deal. I think that the use of binoculars is a distinction, is a kind of distinction among nature photographers. You can prepare the scene in advance. I have met so many great nature photographers, and some of the most outstanding of them use the binoculars to prepare the scene, to anticipate behavior of the animals. And I think that that is very beneficial for the goal, to take a wonderful photograph in the field. I think that that is key. We do a number of categories. We have a number of categories in terms of nature photography. And for at least two, the use of tripod, of a good transport, light, sturdy tripod for landscape and macro photography is key, especially in the area where I live, in southern Chile, so in the windy regions of Patagonia. So following with bits of advice before I'm showing you some of my work in the field, I also would like to encourage you to have a limited use of flash. Under particular conditions, you may need flash, but with these days, with the flexibility of using a high ISO, you can minimize the use of flash in order to have a more natural sense of your image. Also, it's important to not to have a compulsive behavior in triggering the shutter while you're shooting. Take the time and see your histogram. Check your histogram. Check your basics in your cameras. Check your settings, such as if your VR mode is on. How is your ISO according to the area where you are shooting? I hope all these bits of advice make sense, and I also ask the people hearing this presentation and to be a little bit patient with my accent. English is a second language for me, and I am trying to do my best, and I hope that you can understand and all what I'm saying makes sense for you. And the last bit of advice, in my experience, is to try to have an organized library. The process of organizing thousands of images is very difficult, very complex, and I think that there are the tools out there in terms of wonderful software, but at the end, it's your decision. You want to take thousands of people in the field. You probably keep all the files, but please be merciless in terms of organizing a library and putting the corresponding metadata, all the keywords and other things that will help you to find those images later on. When we started this presentation, I refer to the word a lover of the light, in a way, because I like nature photography, the subject, the photographer itself. I like to admire a photographer in the field and see what he is achieving. He is passionate, is committed to the scene, to the capture process, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful process to admire the nature photographer in the field. I hope that you can see the transition. I'm manipulating the slide presentation from the southern hemisphere, and probably there is a slight delay while I'm in the transition. But as I said, we have all sorts of nature photographers in the field, with the small cameras, with prosumer cameras to professional cameras. All the people is looking for something, and I like to emphasize that I can see them working. Some of them look very relaxed, some of them look very happy, some of them look very stressed, and some people just shoot just because of the joy of getting wonderful images. Other people it's because it's part of their professional life. So it's just a wonderful thing that nature photography these days, applied to nature tourism, nature travel, is a discipline that you must take very seriously in order to provide opportunities for all levels of photographers. It's not just the professional nature photographer with a gigantic camera, but there are people starting in the learning process of their gear, familiarizing with their techniques and exchanging. Maybe I love this image because it's father and son enjoying a week trip in Tierra del Fuego, and they have the most wonderful discussions about photography, and exchanging lenses and bodies, and I just love the flow of communication and the way they were exchanging, checking, making critiques to the work of each other. So there are wonderful opportunities just to see the nature photography in the field. It's not just about the beauty of the destination. I like that the way people get close to animals, the way people react to animals and of the opportunities of photographing something beautiful, meaningful. And this is something that I look from behind when I'm working with my groups. I like that everybody can be exploiting their time in the field. There are many opportunities out there, and it's wonderful how people react, see the scene, and exploit the opportunity to photograph something rare and unique. So this is for me the beauty of nature photography these days. It's not just about the technical stuff. It's not just about talking about the software or the techniques or the gear, but it's also about the dynamic of a trip, of a particular trip. Some people detect beauty in small things right in beneath our feet. So it's just wonderful to see this kind of photography, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful expressions, looking for textures, for colors, for interesting subjects, mostly invisible for the naked eye. So I would like to give you a little bit of background on the country I live, Chile, which is located in the southern hemisphere, in South America, in the west edge of South America. I will see if the following slides continues. Yes. And before that, I'm sorry. This is just a summary of what I was referring a few minutes ago, types of photography. We like to provide people to be shooting all day long. In a country such as Chile or in a region such as Patagonia, you have multiple opportunities all day long, and for shooting wildlife, for shooting landscape, for shooting macro. So I think that according you progress in latitude, you have also longer days, and that's the very fascinating opportunity prospect for the region where I live. A typical scene of Patagonia with those wonderful dramatic clouds. This is a scene that you can capture photographing these granite peaks in Torres del Paine National Park in southern Chile. Magnificent set of peaks that we are going to visit later on. Traveling in the fjords along the Straits of Magellan, you can find wonderful opportunities if you are prepared, if you have your ISO and your shutter speed right. This is a Spiel's dolphin in the Straits of Magellan. Or photographing the small things in the field, like this wonderful calceolarias, the emblematic flower of southern Patagonia, lady sleeper. We will continue. I think there is a slight delay, but here we go. As you probably know, I live in Chile, and I As a Chilean, I think that everybody had that sense of being an islander. We are surrounded by monumental physical barriers, such as the Andes. The Andes are such a massive wall located in the eastern flank of the country, separating us from Bolivia and Argentina. On the west coast, along the west coast, we have a cold water current called the Humboldt Current, which doesn't allow any tropical fish to visit our coast. It's a coast with a high productivity, with cold water, rich in oxygen and nutrients. And that's the reason we have penguins and seabirds along the entire coast. And then we have the desert in the north, and the fjords and the ice in the south. Chile stretches for nearly 3,000 miles along the western edge of South America. And there is an interesting fact because it's almost a mirror image of your west coast in North America. Let's say that the Atacama Desert in the northern part of the country corresponds to Baja California or Southern California. Then we have a Mediterranean region around Santiago, the capital of Chile, which is absolutely identical, very reminiscent to California. Farther south, we have the Lake District and Chiloé Island, or the northern archipelago of Patagonia, which is very similar to Oregon, Washington State. Finally, Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, this area very similar, occupied by vast tundra-like environments, rugged mountains and ice fields, is just like the Yukon or Alaska. So in a way, they are fantastic similarities, and that people familiar to that region of North America will recognize while visiting Chile. The Atacama, the driest desert in the world, is present in the northern part of the country because of the existence of a high-pressure system called the Pacific Anticyclone, and also because of the presence of the Humboldt Current. And the Atacama Desert is barren, is rocky, is old, but there are fantastic, intriguing wildlife associated with that. That's the beauty of the desert in terms of the presence of the Andes on the eastern flank in the shape of the Altiplano, this high altitude plateau located over 13,000 feet. So we have a high desert up there, very barren, but fantastic in terms of geology, and with an interesting array of wildlife, with flamingos, for instance. These flamingos of 3 kinds breeding up there in the brackish lagoons and alkaline ponds. So it's just a great area to visit. Of course, it's an area of extremes because you have these smoky volcanoes and you have geyser fields, and in spite of its ruggedness, it's still an area occupied by people. And besides the grand nature up there, these grand landscapes, you can also be a witness of how people can adapt to these conditions, to these extreme conditions of low levels of oxygen out there. I love the Altiplano. I love the desert. I love the tiny villages which are these days shrinking in terms of population. People desert these places because there are better prospects for them down in the coast. So they are not highlanders anymore. That is sad. But these beautiful churches and villages remain for centuries. So that is also an interesting aspect of photography out there. Is the culture part of great value And if you have the good interpretation while there, I think that it's just striking. It's striking as this is seen in Salar de Suride, where you can see this thousands of flamingos nesting in this alkaline lake of three kinds: Chilean flamingos, Andean flamingo, and James's flamingo. Besides a great array of other creatures. The light progresses, changes, there are textures, the tassel grasses, the bunch grasses, the colors and the profiles of the volcano. I think that this area is full of beauty, but it's also demanding physically, as you have to explore it in a fairly high altitude, as I say, over 13,000 feet. Along the coast, sometimes you have these wonderful miracles, especially when you have unusual rainy winters. We call it Desierto Florido in Chile, which is the blooming desert. We have just a vast, barren expanse of land, but with occasional winter rains, you have the miracle happens. You have the enough humidity affecting this monumental area where you can see a vast variety of plants. This is a region that we share with Peru and Bolivia. I will explain you later also. We are going to shift zone, progressing towards the south, and we are going to concentrate now a little bit in the Lake District, in the northern part of western Patagonia. The Andes is an omnipresent feature there, with these perfect snow-capped volcanoes, temperate woodlands, and rushing rivers coming from the Andes. A region which is absolutely occupied by monumental lakes. And farther south, we have Patagonia, where the main features are the Andes, again, the ice, and the sea. I think that Patagonia, we will talk about that later. There are major forces colliding there, which are the Andes and the Southern Ocean. And it's fascinating how these two forces really create a very rugged and beautiful landscape in terms of the ice field, in terms of the vegetation, in terms of the rocky formations such as fjords, islands, and thousands of little islands in the western flank of Patagonia. You know, I'm biased, and I was born in this region, and I think this is pretty much my favorite place on earth in terms of many things, in terms not just of the visual impact, but also of all the other physical forces around, particularly wind, the harsh winters, the history behind in terms of explorers and natives, and of course the wildlife, which is my main source of inspiration. So I think that it's an area I have the privilege of exploring it for over 35 years. When I was a little boy of 8 years, my parents took me on field trips to enjoy the birds and study the plants, and that was it. That was the moment I decided to become a naturalist, and I took the challenge in the long term, and I feel very privileged to be involved in providing interpretation for visitors from all over the world visiting these places. As I say, it's not just about, it's a complete set of circumstances, beautiful scenery, interesting locations, wonderful history, intriguing wildlife, and certainly I love my place on earth, Patagonia, which is a region we shared with the surrounding adjacent regions of Argentina. So there are many opportunities there for landscape photography. If you are prepared with your tripod and your neutral density filters, and in a not so bright morning, cloudy conditions are the best. You can go and exploit the long shutter speed, long exposures, and get this wonderful creamy effect on the water, on the rapids, waterfalls. There are many opportunities like this down there, and we like to take people not just in very bright conditions, but going out in more modest circumstances. Of course, cloudy days offer the best for that kind of photography. Ice, the glacial ice. This is the third largest ice field in the world after Antarctica and Greenland, and its name is the Southern Patagonian ice field. This is a very vast body of ice extending, literally covering the southernmost portion of the Andes. And it's fascinating because it creates, the presence of this ice field determines the whole geography down there. Huge lakes in the Argentinian side, and magnificent fjords with tidewater glaciers in the Chilean side. Of course, most of these glaciers, which in total are nearly 50, are receding, not just in their fronts, but also the loss of the thickness of the ice is significant, and we can say huge every year. This is a typical scene at Gray Glacier in southern Patagonia at Torres del Paine National Park, photographed during the sunset. Birds for me are probably my main interest. I just have the privilege to compile with two other ornithologists a field guide on the birds of Chile. Birds are part of all my days in the field, while I'm staying home, while studying at home. So they are a part of my daily routine, and I love them. I love to see intriguing groups of birds down in Chile and Patagonia, with incredible diversity and able to occupy every single demanding niche of the country, from deserts, from oasis valleys, to temperate woodlands, to the fjords and islands of Tierra del Fuego, for instance. We discovered 10 years ago a small group of pioneers. They were king penguins trying to occupy a former breeding colony in the island. That colony was probably extirpated by the Indians several hundred years ago. But the penguins are stubborn, and they are colonizing once again this region. So we are taking people to this very bay called Useless Bay, and see the progress. They are rearing their chicks. Several chicks have been able to survive in recent years. So it's just fascinating how nature really take the opportunity, and is plastic in a way. Plastic in terms that things are not written in stone. If there are the right conditions, if there is less disturbance, and if, of course, there is richness of food, then the birds, the mammals, will come back. Many examples like this happen in Patagonia right now, not just with penguins, but also with albatrosses, with other seabirds, whales, leopard seals, elephant seals, that are coming back after centuries of merciless exploitation during the sealing and whaling times. Penguins are obviously one of the most photogenic, charismatic groups of birds, and people just love them. People want to exploit to photograph their habits, but also to take fantastic close-ups, seeing the structures, seeing details on the eyes, on the flippers, on the perfectly adapted plumage. So I think that there are great opportunities for the nature photographers. It's not just taking a picture of a beautiful subject, also taking time to observe the scene and watch behavior. And if you are fortunate, you can capture that behavior. This is a black-browed albatross photographed in a colony in Tierra del Fuego. The fantastic eye ring of these imperial cormorants in Tierra del Fuego also. So you can really, with the right gear, with the right conditions, with the right attitude, you can photograph exceptional things in the field. Chilean flamingos about to land in Torres del Paine. This is a bird that you probably relate to more warmer conditions or places on Earth, but Patagonia is plentiful, offer them plentiful opportunities to feed. So these are just a great a variety of birds. It's not just little birds, but also very showy, charismatic, colorful birds, or with the most interesting habits, like this torrent duck, and specialized duck occurring in rushing streams in the Andes. It's a beautiful, beautiful bird with extraordinary abilities to deal with those turbulent waters. They have to dive constantly underneath the rocks to get their food. So for me, it's an exercise, not just photographing wildlife and presenting them to my friends, to my family, to my guests, but also learning from every opportunity of being out there, learning about the names of the subjects I'm photographing. I am photographing something unique, something rare, something very common. I like that communication with my guest, encouraging to exploit the opportunities, which are many but restricted to the duration of the trip. Seed snipes are fantastic, very reminiscent to ptarmigans and quails in the northern hemisphere. Finally, I'd like to show you a little bit of the mammals. Mammals are not in great abundance in the southern parts of South America. We have to remember that the presence of the Andes and the glacial ice have been very effective in reducing the niches for them. So their distribution is still adjusting. This is a very rare canid. The first picture was Darwin's fox, photographed in the island of Chiloé. No more than 100 individuals still live. These two are parts of the pool of mammalian species found in the Andes, like guanacos, the wild ancestor of the llama, and the vizcacha, which is this very charismatic, cute, chinchilla-like rodent. Foxes are scavengers, are hunters, are opportunistic. They exploit opportunities. They go after carcasses of birds, bird eggs, fruits, you name it. But they are very successful and are great and are great subjects for photography. While relaxed, you can shoot from a very low angle and get a little bit of vegetation in the middle, instead of just shooting a mammal from above. I like to shoot from lower angles. I like to be humble while shooting animals too. I like to be in the position of almost expressing to them that I am a visitor, and I feel privileged when they show a little bit of natural behavior, and I am able to capture that natural behavior without any disturbance. That's an achievement when you are able to do that. So remember, you are just a visitor in these spaces, in these habitats, in their environs. Guanacos offer wonderful silhouettes in the crest of the hills down in Patagonia with the right light. So photogenic with those big eyes and large eyelashes. And the ears also tell so much. Their ears and the tails, they tell so much about what they are experiencing. Are they mad? Are they relaxed? Are they alert because of a predator around? So it's not just photographing. As I say, as a compulsory activity. You have to think your image. You have to observe. Use the camera afterwards. For me, probably this is the most photogenic subject in Chile and Patagonia these days. Puma, a Quechua-derived word meaning powerful and strong. This is the largest of all the races of the mountain lion or cougar that is found throughout the Americas. And Torres del Paine and the periphery of the park is probably the best place to photograph these cats, which are found in great densities in all sorts of ages, in age groups. And this is a cat that also you may refer or you may know is a nocturnal cat. But because of some circumstances, it's more active these days, and you can see a fair amount of activity at the very early hours of the day or during the evening. So during most of the day, they just are relaxing, resting in a neve, in a cave, in a den. I would like just to comment about this particular cat we are looking here. It was named Mocha by several well-known nature photographers and rangers in the park. She was very tame, and I say she was because a lot of people thought she was killed somewhere outside the park. She disappeared for almost a year. Was probably the most easiest to photograph puma to photograph in the field because of its friendly manners. But she disappeared. Recently, probably 4 months ago, she was photographed in Argentina near El Calafate, and some of the locals organized expeditions and outings to try to find it once again. The good news was that this young puma was traveling and increasing their territory in company of a calf. So she's doing well, and everybody wishes the best and long life to this particular charismatic cat, Mocha, which means tailless. So pumas are are great in terms of and generous sometimes in terms of showing their habits, showing their secret world. However, the habitat is demanding. You can see these pictures, but you have to realize that some of them were shot after 4 or 5 hours in the waiting. So everything in nature, everything is about time, about patience, about determination. And it's the way it should be. There are things that makes our work easier these days, great gear, wonderful accessories, lots of gadgets. But at the end, what it really matters is the way you use all your gear, all your equipment, and it's your determination to get this image. This is Mocha's sister. It's called Hermana or Sarmiento, another of the friendly pumas in the park. It is estimated that around 60 individual pumas occupy a very restricted area in the eastern side of Torres del Paine National Park. And the abundance of those pumas is determined because of the huge population of guanaco, their main prey, which numbers around 4,000 to 5,000 of them. So puma photography, besides the other things in nature, is something quite popular these days in southern Chile. My point is that Chile offers countless opportunities for the nature photography. It really is. And in each region, you find so different highlights in terms of the landscape, in terms of the wildlife, and in terms of the culture. So perhaps that variety made this destination growing in terms of interest and in terms of visitors in later years. Torres del Paine is very busy at times, and it's very difficult to get accommodation. Lots of people are trying also to photograph these cats during the winter, the southern winter. But of course, the conditions are more demanding. So that was a little bit of the presentation, the deal with the puma, one of the 36 cats, wild cats in the world. And believe it or not, there are people looking for each one of these cats, not just to photograph them, to see them first. It's a quite difficult task. In recent years, in the last 10 years, for me, the photographing wildlife was my main thing. But I'm turning more and more into macro. I feel very confused because I am with my binoculars, with my long lens, but then I look and rest and see the ground and find these wonderful myriads of flowers, alpine flora, and I can't resist. I just need to take the time to take the gear and start photographing plants throughout Chile, Argentina, Peru, and other regions too. But it's just a wonderful exercise of combining. I think that my photography these days is very eclectic. It's not just specialized in birds as in my initial years, but I think that that's the beauty of nature photography. You have the gear, you have memory cards, and you can shoot all day long, and you can learn from the pictures. As I emphasize that, it's not just about taking hundreds of images. It's about learning about the species and other things. All these most recent shots were taken during the blooming desert events in the last 10 years. These conditions are more and more common in recent years because the weather is so weird. Right now, we are expecting a very wet winter in the Atacama Desert. So possibly we are going to have a fantastic blooming event by August, September, and October. Who knows? But the conditions are there. So that's part of the presentation. And before I leave, before I giving you Emily once again, I would like to emphasize this 10 tips that Emily kindly asked me to give to the audience. Avoid bright colors is one of the things. Take considerations about the weight, about how neatly packed is your gear for the plane journey, and also for the field work. Binoculars are also an important part of your field gear, and please use them. Consider that to use, and will enhance your field experience, I'm sure, as well as the tripod for landscape and macro photography. Then we have also a limited use of flash, and also take time to look at the back of your camera to evaluate your histogram, constantly check your ISO settings, VR modes, and keep an organized library at the end. Hope this gives you some insight about this destination. I'm very, very grateful for your patience with my English, but I hope that the images also have spoken and been appealing to you. And thanks very much for your time. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Lee.
Well, thank you, Claudio, for sharing some of your tips with us, as well as your photography. And I'm going to try and take the screen back over and advance to the next slide. You know, as Claudio sort of alluded to, he literally has written the book on the birds of Chile, not only the field guide, but a great number of photography books as well. So traveling with him really is a delight. Before we touch on your questions, I did want to let you know, International Expeditions does have a variety of ways to travel to Chile, from the Atacama Desert in the far north down to Patagonia, where you can trek, you can go photograph pumas, penguins, whales, or you can go out to Chiloé Island that Claudio just briefly touched on, where not only do you have the fantastic wildlife and landscapes of northern Patagonia, but you also have some fantastic folklore. The people believe in gnomes and ghost ships. Additionally, some of the other options that we offer as we move to the next slide have to do, if you're really into birding, there are options that we have where you can combine not only birding in the various regions of Chile, central, northern, and Patagonia, Tierra del Fuego, but how about birds and wines of Chile? So you can spend your morning out watching for waved albatross, penguins, and some of the species that Claudio highlighted, and then spend your afternoon sampling some of the incredible varieties. And I know this particular trip is near and dear to Claudio's heart, as he is quite the connoisseur as well. So thank you. We're about to touch on your questions. If you have any, please notice on your right-hand side of your screen, there is a box that says questions. You can type your questions in there. I'm going to go ahead and ask Claudio some of the most popular questions that we've had, most dealing with the equipment and the kind of lenses you use, and then we'll move on to some of the destination-specific questions. So first off, Claudio, people really wanted to find out more about the equipment that you use. What sorts of lenses do you bring? Do you bring more than one body on these trips when you travel?
Well, Emily, that's a great question. Thank you very much. I would say that people these days a question about the amount of gear they will bring to a journey like this, with lots of opportunities, but of course with lots of restrictions for the flight journey and also for the field transition. So I think that probably a lens like a 24-105, a wide lens, in addition to either 70 to 200 millimeters, or my suggestions would be a 400 millimeter lens. Those two lenses really provide a wide, you are all set from the wide to the long lens, in which you need to photograph birds at the distance or mammals. Some people carry, for instance, a 100 millimeter macro, particularly if you are considering to photograph alpine flora from November to January, through January. That's also a good suggestion. It's not a luxury item. You use it a lot in the field, together with a light tripod, something light that you can use in addition to with the weight of your backpack to endure those strong winds that can affect your picture at times, especially if you are photographing sunrises in the mountains. So I think that those are part of the essentials, together with perhaps if you are considering to bring a second body. It's also a good idea, especially if you are having trouble, an unexpected problem traveling while shooting. So I think a second body is also a good idea, together with polarized filter, a big stopper filter like and neutral density filter, and so those are parts of the gear. And in any circumstance, we refer to a list of gear to our guests in every IE trip.
Thank you, Claudio. And someone wanted specifically to know which lenses you use to photograph puma.
Well, I use the 100-400, which is my favorite lens, because I don't need with that a tripod. I've been using the 200-400, but the problem is that you need that tripod, and that limits your movements a lot, especially on rugged terrain. So 100-400 is a very good option. It's light. There are great straps or harness system to use it in the field, so you don't feel much of the weight in your shoulders. So I think that that's a good lens to use for puma.
A few people have asked what locations, which parks are the best for photographing wildlife in both Atacama and in southern Chile.
Perfect. I would say there are. I would mention three actually. I would mention Lauca National Park up in the northern part in the Altiplano. Lauca, L-A-U-C-A. Lauca is fantastic because it's probably the most diverse in terms of wildlife of the parks in Chile, and it's poorly visited. It's not many. A lot of people go there, and the scenery is fantastic. The distances are long. The roads are not that great, but that's a beautiful, beautiful area that I love to enjoy. I enjoy visiting 5 times per year. Then around the periphery of the village of San Pedro de Atacama, farther south, in the middle of the Atacama Desert, that village, San Pedro, offers a lot of shooting locations for every day. You can stay there 6 days, and every day will be completely different, because you have flamingos, you have the vicuñas, you have the guanacos, the volcanoes, the geyser fields, the villages. Finally, in Patagonia, I would suggest Torres del Paine, of course, which is probably the one that offer you a lot of great wildlife encounters together with magnificent scenery, the mountains, the lakes, the vegetation, and Tierra del Fuego, of course, traveling in the Magellan Straits, Useless Bay, or along the Beagle Channel.
Claudio, a few people have asked what the best times of year are to visit Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego.
Well, I think that that's also that question is adjusting a little bit in terms of the traditional time of the year to go is from November to February, and lots of people really like to photograph the spring, the southern spring. So I would suggest to consider even earlier than that, October, November. If you want to photograph flowers, then you have to go in December. But of course you have longer days with a very short night. So if you are considering to go to Patagonia to photograph landscapes, and if you are determined to go in January or December or January, then your days are going to be very long and with very little sleep, time to sleep, because you really start your day at 3:30 in the morning and you end maybe at 10. So it's really it's a tricky question. It depends on what you are going to photograph, but it's great in terms of highlights anytime from October through March.
Fantastic. Well, Claudia, I think you've covered the bulk of the questions that we have. So I just want to take a few moments just to thank everyone one more time for joining us today. Thank you, Claudio, for joining us from Latin America. And also encourage you, International Expeditions does keep our programs very small so that you get the most amount of attention, instruction, and the best possible experience as you travel with Claudio and some of our other expedition leaders and guides. If you are interested, please do give us a call at 800-633-4734 or visit our website, ietravel.com, where you can find the full range of our travel options in Chile. So I'll thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you, Claudio, for your final thoughts.
Well, a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks very much to the audience for being so patient in the course of this presentation. And I'm sure we all share a passion for wildlife, for pristine landscapes. And I really hope that we can meet and enjoy of some rewarding experiences in the field, in Chile, in that beautiful region of South America. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you very much, Lee.
And this will conclude our webinar. Goodbye, everyone.